If there is one anime crossover that should have existed decades ago, it's a Lupin III and Cat's Eye crossover. However, despite Lupin starting in the late 60s or early 70s, depending on if you count the pilot or not, and Cat's Eye being from the 80s, it still somehow took until 2023 before it happened. But now it's here, and as a big fan of both works, I'm gonna talk about it, and we're gonna see if it's actually any good. So in the early 80s, City Hunter mangaka Tsukasa Hojo, who had not yet made City Hunter, made a series about a group of female thieves who would steal artworks created by their missing father in order to try and find him. This series can pretty much be summed up as female Lupin. Its episodic nature was very much inspired by Lupin heists, and the cats, and particularly main character Hitomi Kisugi's cat and mouse game with police officer Toshio Utsumi, was very much inspired by Lupin and Senigata's own cat and mouse game. However, in Cat's Eye, it also has a more romantic twist, since Hitomi and Toshio are engaged. It's okay, he doesn't know that she's Cat's Eye. So obviously, because of these clear similarities, a Lupin III and Cat's Eye crossover seemed like the biggest no-brainer crossover since... I don't know, Lupin III and Detective Conan? But while it did take quite a lot longer than it should have, it did eventually happen. So let's talk about it. And let's start by looking at the story. So basically, Lupin and the Cat's Eye girls, Hitomi, Rui, and Ai, are all gunning for the same target. 3 paintings left behind by the Cat's Eye sisters' father, Michael Hines. This leads to a showdown between Lupin and the cats. However, lurking in the shadows, there's the typical big bad. In this case, it's a group of art dealers that also engage in arms dealing. And they're a group of Nazis. And of course, Fujiko Mine is originally helping out the big bad, as usual. Now, the reason Lupin and the Nazis are targeting these paintings is because they contain a certain treasure. And the reason the cats are after them is because, well, they are their father's paintings. But also because an old man named Heinrich Berger told them that Lupin used to help their father, but then betrayed him and is now after the paintings for himself. So here's the deal with this movie. In case you haven't been watching this video and have just been listening, this movie is fully CG. Now that in and of itself isn't really an issue. I mean, Lupin III the First was also fully CG, and it looked really good. However, that is not the case here. The CG in this movie is honestly quite weak. The models don't look good at all in my opinion. And the animation, while not the worst CG animation I've ever watched, is pretty subpar as well. Especially if you compare it to Mars Animation Planet's work on Lupin III the First. But yeah, visually this movie isn't great. But that's not the only issue I have with it. The second point of criticism I have for this movie is the writing. Some things are minor, but still a little annoying, like how the Cat's Eye girls have somehow never heard of Lupin before some guy named Heinrich shows up and tells them about him, and yet despite never having heard of him, they somehow know exactly who he is as soon as they see him for the first time. So they don't know who he is, but they know what he looks like. Okay. It's also funny to me that they don't know him since Toshio ends up meeting Senigata. But unlike the cats, Toshio actually knows and is a big fan of Senigata. So at least someone did their homework. The second issue I have with the writing comes in the way it tries to hit you with some twists along the way. Like for example, we are introduced to the big bad that is the Nazis. But did you know that there's also another big bad that's an even bigger bad, whose identity has been kept secret from us this entire time? Man, I wonder who in the world that could be. There definitely isn't a single character in this movie that sticks out like a sore thumb. But oh well. Let's not just focus on the negatives of this movie though, because unlike what it might sound like, I don't actually hate this movie. I like both Lupin and Cat's Eye, and as a piece of fan service, this movie makes me happy, and that is ultimately why we're here. You watch this because you want to see the two sets of characters interact with each other, and you get a decent amount of that. As usual with these crossovers though, the Lupin gang kind of takes a bit of a backseat and plays supporting cast the Cat's Eye. Similar to Lupin vs Detective Conan. This might be a bit annoying if you're primarily watching this as a Lupin fan, but if you're watching as a Cat's Eye fan, you might enjoy it more. I do wish that they would have done more with the groupings though, because while Lupin and I, as well as Senigata and Toshio, end up hanging around with each other for a bit, helping each other out, Jigen and Hitomi, as well as Goemon and Neduri, also gets paired up, but sadly we don't really get to see those two groups interact with each other very much at all. And all the way at the end, Fujiko helps all 3 cats escape. But I definitely wish they would have done more with these groupings in the movie. But it's difficult since they only have 1.5 hours to do everything, so what we ended up getting is fine. Alright, so let's sum up my thoughts on Lupin III vs Cat's Eye. The long and short of it is that I think it's fun, but it could have been a lot better. Personally, I'm a big fan of both works, so seeing the characters from both series interacting with each other is quite fun. But the poor CG and some fairly poor writing really brings it all down. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy it despite all this. Yeah, it's not the crossover I wanted, but hey, at least if you're a fan of both series, you got something. Who knows? Maybe in another 40 years we can try again, and see if we can create something better. Alright, so that was Lupin III vs. Cat's Eye. A dream crossover for me personally. Now let me ask you guys, what would be your dream anime crossover? Does it already exist, or is it something you wish would happen? It could even be a crossover between an anime and something non-anime. Leave a comment letting me know your dream anime crossover. Also, subscribe for more anime-related content from me, and follow me on Twitter and join my Discord if you want to keep up to date with what I'm doing and what videos I'm working on. Anyways, I'll see you all in the next one. Peace!